I ask everyone today to please be efficient in your comments and avoid redundancy so that we can hear from as many viewpoints on as many cases as possible. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda today? Seeing none, we will move on to old business. We have one item. For this old business item, the commission has already received a full staff presentation, applicant presentation, and heard from the public. Our focus today will be on any updates or changes to the case since our last meeting. This case is Z1224 at Olds Crude Road and Old Mill Burney Assemblage. This case is to change approximately 242.8 acres from Wake County R30 to R6 and R6 with conditions. We will now turn to Matthew Clem for a presentation on updates to the case since our last meeting.
Good morning, Chair and Planning Commission. Thanks for the intro there. Your deadline for action is February 8th. You heard this last at your December 10th meeting. Since you discussed it last, there have been changes to zoning conditions. Just a bit of context here for the site and surrounding area. So underlined on the following slides are the new zoning conditions or amended zoning conditions. So condition number 1 originally had stated that 30% of the site would be designated as open space. That's been increased to 40%. The second condition is new, adding 30% of the site shall remain as undisturbed area. Condition number 6 has also changed, adding a maximum of 330 townhome units to the mix, to a total of 550. And then number 9 is adding a landscape protective yard along Old Mill Burney Road, which has frontage for the rezoning site. And condition 14 adds additional stormwater management to development of the site in the future. So the request is consistent with the future land use map of low-scale residential. It is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan overall, and that's largely based on the fact that the site is located outside of the city's ETJ in an area that has been identified for future study. It's on the urban fringe in a rural area here. And so the comprehensive plan recommends that the sites be annexed and rezoned following a study which the city is currently working on. So that is my presentation, and I can take any questions, and your deadline is February 8th.
Thanks very much. We have already heard from the applicant and from the public, but just so I can get a sense by show of hands, would the applicant or any members of the public like to provide any additional comments and updates to this case? See the applicant, anyone else? In that case, I'd like to provide an additional 4 minutes to, oh yes, excuse me, yes. I'd like to provide an additional 4 minutes to each side. We will start with the applicant and those in favor. They'll have an additional 4 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Ms. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Collier Marsh with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street. I will not do the full presentation. I know, Ms. Bennett, you were not at the last meeting, so happy to answer any questions if there are any. But we were tasked with a couple of specific follow-up items at the last meeting, and we've endeavored to address all these. And so it's a relatively large site. We are in the special study area, but do want to remind everybody that there is precedent for some projects in this area that have been approved, and there's some conditions that have been expected for projects in and around this area. Our R6 and R6 conditional use is consistent with the low-density residential designation. Our single-family homes and townhomes are also consistent. Notably, the comprehensive plan calls for increased density and more intensity if you provide meaningful amounts of open space. We're kind of doing both here, where we're providing that open space but not asking for the next level of intensity or density with this project. So we had some specific requests from the Planning Commission and from neighbors at the last hearing. So from Planning Commission, we alluded that we had submitted some additional conditions, but they hadn't been reviewed because we missed it by a day or so. So you wanted to see those and have full staff review of those conditions. Commissioner Peeler asked us to add a stormwater commitment. From the neighbors, we were asked to provide a cap to the townhome units to address stormwater on the northernmost parcels and to address the visibility of units along Old Mill Verney Road. And so we did all of those things. We redlined our conditions. At the top is that open area condition. Again, we want to set a high bar here. We know that development in this area has certain expectations, and so we're committing to 40% open area, 30% of the site would be undisturbed area. The rest of these that aren't in red are kind of what other projects have set the bar at in this area, and then we've gone above and beyond in certain areas. We added the townhome cap as requested. The red 35-foot buffer along Old Mill Burney is what was specifically requested by the neighbors that lived on the other side, so they commented at the last hearing. And then at the bottom, the menu's covering it, but we added enhanced stormwater commitments for the 2, 10, and 25-year storms. So we addressed all the specific feedback we received on the project. There's plenty more information we can provide. I do just want to emphasize, when you look at the development of this project, the yellow shows the envisioned developable areas, green shows all of those open space commitments that we're making here. Then you kind of zoom out and you see the surrounding area and the intensity of development and where you've got trees cleared and not. The level of disturbance is pretty comparable, but we're achieving kind of a much more efficient development pattern here. So I think this is the right type of development for this area moving forward. Can answer any questions on our amenities, our product types we're proposing here. And then the last thing just to comment on, and I'll reserve the remainder of our time, we have Travis Flewitt with Kimley Horn here who can answer questions on traffic, but we spent a lot of time going through traffic improvements. We've got a lot of slides to cover. This was the #1 topic with neighbors, and just want to emphasize that if there are questions on that, we're happy to discuss them. So with that, I'll save the rest of my time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of this project? Then, seeing none, I'd like to open up public comment to the opposition. Those opposed to the case have a total of 4 minutes to speak. Please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to apologize first off, saying I'm not a sophisticated applicant here, so to speak. But I do live on Old Cruise Road, which is kind of abuts the proposed development. And I do have a couple concerns, specifically as they pertain to the environmental issues, which I believe have been somewhat addressed. But I am concerned about the removal of so much forest in that area. So I don't know if there's any way to reserve any of that space for public use or not. I know, of course, the facilities there will be open to the individuals who are a part of those developments, but considering that there's going to be a significant amount of, we'll say, impact to my community, both in terms of traffic, in terms of a reduction of green space, and any other unknown potential impacts, it's one of the things I really would like to address and bring to your attention. I think that's the main thing is I'm not sure what sort of, I can look up what studies have been done, but I'm very concerned about the environmental impacts of the development. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you state your name?
Oh, sorry. Jason Corbiere.
Okay, thank you.
I live at 3004 Old Cruise Road.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in opposition? Yes.
Yeah, hello. My name is Alan Harrington. I'm at 2949 Candlehurst. I do want to call out that a lot of the stormwater addresses that I had last time in the email that I sent in was answered, and they did dedicate a lot of that land in the park. So thank you guys very much for that. I think that is definitely a step in the right direction. So my only comment or question is, why would this be approved before the Northeast Special Study is completed? Which I know is a general, kind of rhetorical question, but that's what I've got.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in opposition to this project? Then, seeing none, we can bring this back to the table for questions from our planning commissioners. Would anyone like to get us started? Yes, Commissioner Alwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I have a couple of questions about the comparison between existing entitlements under Wake County zoning and what would occur if this were to be approved. So in particular, if this zoning were to not be approved and development were to proceed under a different form, what would the fire service look like? I'm also interested in what the stormwater requirements would be if this was developed under Wake County zoning.
Yeah, thanks. We do have stormwater staff here. I think they can do their best to answer what the county requirements would be. And then in terms of fire, I don't believe we have fire in the room today.
So if this were approved, we would bring this into the ETJ, and it would be Raleigh's responsibility to provide fire service, I believe.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, if it was rezoned, it would be under our responsibility to provide the full range of public service.
And if it's being outside the ETJ, do we have any responsibility for fire service to extraterritorial like outside the ETJ, so extra territorial jurisdiction areas?
I can't answer that. We can follow up with fire. Thanks.
One of the requirements before they could act on a rezoning, because it's outside our ETJ, outside our corporate limits, city council will have to make a decision on whether or not to annex the property. If they decide to annex the property, they have so many weeks to impose zoning, and so that's why annexation is required when you submit a rezoning for Wake County property. And so there will be an annexation evaluation discussion, which often requires some fire service. The reality is there is, I don't know how many formal mutual service agreements we have. Still, some have expired, but there's mutual service in operation between the various governmental entities and the volunteer fire department covering various areas. And so fire service out here probably won't change a lot. We cover a lot of area that's outside our corporate limits already with fire. So I don't know about this specific area, but in general, short term, there's very little change in the fire service.
Just one comment on the fire service, if I can, just to provide some more information, because I think we talked about it a little bit. So we had some discussions as to what we should do to ensure there's adequate fire service. So we're making a contribution that matches what's been done, but we had early on talked about, well, can land be used for fire station? I believe the Rivertown development has set aside a lot for a future fire station, so that's in the plans. And so all the other projects that have come in basically on a per unit basis are contributing towards the city fire department to ensure service. We also had talked about, and this goes to one of the neighbors' questions, that land on the north side of Old Mill Bernie, that little triangle, is there a public use? And so part of the discussion was, could that be used for fire apparatus storage? We actually have kind of gone down the line of talking with Parks and Rec about dedicating that for a future park for the city of Raleigh. I didn't present that in the initial presentation because the condition just isn't going to work, unfortunately. We're proposing to dedicate one seller's entire piece of land, and so they're a little wary about making that commitment at this point, but it's this developer's intent to dedicate that land for a public use. And if it's parks, great. If it needs to be fire, that's also a possibility.
I'm sorry, a quick addendum to my question. I can't read the legend from here. What is the difference between the eastern area inside the study area? I believe that's the study area that's outlined. What's the yellow big block on the right on the eastern side compared
Yeah, so that is the rural residential designation, and the lighter color where we are is the low-density residential designation.
Good morning, Sally Hoyt, Raleigh Stormwater. In terms of county requirements versus city, both have to meet the water quality or nutrient requirements. Those would be the same, whether it's in the city or the county. I have a coworker looking up the detention requirements, but it looks like it is for a lower design storm than the base city requirements. I will note that the condition offered on stormwater would include detention for the 2, 10, and 25-year storms. The 2 and 10-year storms are already in the UDO, so that is not a condition beyond the existing requirements.
Thank you. Any other follow-up or other questions from the commission? Yes,
I
Commissioner
had a
Keeling.
question about the, and apologies if this was hit before I walked in, but about the 30% undisturbed area. The Hodges Mill, which I believe runs through this property, is a tributary of the Neuse. Don't tributaries of the Neuse require 50-foot buffers to begin with, from what I recall, right? Undisturbed. That would be the same classification.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, how much of that 30% is already required under the Neuse buffers? Would you happen to know?
I don't know offhand. I guess one piece to add is that we also kind of, I guess, related, but not directly tied to your question is for, where is it here? We offer a 75-foot greenway easement along that creek corridor, so we're widening that buffered area in the first place. But again, going back to the plans, a lot of it is in and around those riparian areas, but we're trying not to push the bounds too far to get, every possible square foot.
Yeah, I was just going to add, yes, there are 50-foot buffers on that end, possibly some of the tributaries coming into it, which may be jurisdictional waters. So there is, under the state buffer rules, the first 30 feet could not be disturbed. And then for a parcel or project this size, urban forestry would protect the outer 20 feet of that buffer. In general. Also, there is a lot of floodplain on this property, so there would be some protections there, although if they put the undisturbed area in the floodplain, that would be a greater protection.
Got it. And I guess conceptually, what is the difference between undisturbed and tree conservation? Is there any in terms of what happens with the tree cover?
Sorry, I'm just going to pull up the map here that I think would be helpful to discuss. This. Right, so there's the Hodges Mill Creek, as you mentioned, commission member. Yeah, do you want to address the tree cover and undisturbed?
Yeah,
area?
so the intent with the undisturbed area versus tree conservation, undisturbed is meant to be a broader term that would incorporate tree conservation as well as other areas. And so without having done a tree survey for the entire site, we don't know if all of those areas would meet tree conservation requirements. And so the safer commitment in our mind is to commit to undisturbed area, most of which, or a large percentage of which, is expected to be tree conservation.
Other questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bennett, or Vice Chair Bennett.
Thank you. One of the members of the public who spoke asked if any of that green space would be public use, open for public use. I just wanted to get that answered for him.
Yeah, so again, going back to I'm going the wrong way. Anyway, so the section of the property north of Old Mill Burney Road that we call that triangle, it's Lennar's intent, and we had actually submitted a condition to staff for review to dedicate all of that for a public park. So it actually abuts the Wake County Park. We can't submit a condition because, again, the seller's concerned, you've now committed to dedicating all of my property for a park, but until you close on the property, so we have to work through that, but it's intended to be a commitment in some form or another.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none? Oh, yes, Commissioner Lampman?
I'll just make note that I appreciate the support for the stormwater discharge and the 25-year storm event, and then also the additional undisturbed area and tree cover. I think just as general as we've built out in these areas, just anytime we do a master plan community, I think flooding and that sort of thing downstream is becoming more and more of an issue. So that attention to that level of, the storm event, and making sure that there's some sort of, is it a retention, or what type of, like, what's the design for that?
So the city's requirements for the 2 and 10 year, and we would, without other information, apply the 25-year in the same way with the zoning condition. It's that the rate of flow leaving the site at any point where flow leaves the site cannot be greater in the development scenario than it is in the existing conditions at that. And the 2, 10, and 25, that defines a certain amount of rainfall.
Okay,
So
and-
for example, the 10 is about 5 inches of rain.
Okay, and just for clarification on your comment there, you said specifically that the requirements are to mirror the current conditions. So, right,
Right, it's based on, we compare existing conditions at the time of the development application to what is being
and what you're talking
proposed.
about is the planning conditions in the documents, not necessarily how the land is itself. It's that the conditions that are placed on that land from a legal standpoint, as opposed to the current.
No, it's the
flow from
current, so
the
if it's
land.
currently forest, we compare it to forest.
Oh, got it, okay. I appreciate that clarification, thank you.
Other questions, comments from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Raleigh.
Chair Miller, I have a comment. I'm studying the development permits that have been issued in the area, and generally, I tend to support these sorts of proposals because the alternate development options tend to be worse and preserve less of our stormwater integrity and other values that are important to the city and our development. There is a great deal of pressure, especially on the eastern side of this, towards the western side of this study area. It looks like there's been a lot of permits in the last year, but they're all within the city corporate limits. And it looks like there has not been a lot of development outside of the corporate limits. I guess that, you know what? I take that back, because this wouldn't show, will we see the developments as not within the corporate limits?
You're looking back, you're not looking back in time, so it could be that the zoning came in with an annexation on some of that property.
Okay, because we see Rivertown.
We have had, I don't know exactly where, we'd have to have staff look at it, but we have had in this general area, this is not the first request of county zoning to be changed to Raleigh zoning through an annexation.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think that's right.
Yes, would the applicant like to respond?
I got way out of whack on the order of the slides, but when you look at where we are, it looks like we're centrally located in the Northeast Special Study Area, but when you look at the development in the surrounding area, much of the land between our site moving west back to city limits is developed with Wake County subdivisions, pretty low density residential. So that's kind of, we've had some well-attended neighborhood meetings because it is pretty well developed, but just with that real low-scale residential.
Thank you. Commissioner Peeler.
I know this is something we mentioned at the last meeting, but the Northeast Area Special Study, when is that supposed to be kind of finalized and presented to council?
Defer to staff.
Couldn't answer to you in a second.
It's okay.
Hi, my name is Matt Bailey. I am the planning manager for comprehensive long-range planning. Right now, we are, the special study area is on pause at the moment as we work through the new scope of work because of the new state law requirements. So right now, we're working on a new scope of work, and we'll have something put together for you.
Got it.
So once that scope of work is complete, based on changing state law, either in this past year or waiting for it to land this year, once that scope of work is complete, approximately, I mean, what would your estimated range be on how long it will take after that?
Originally, when the original scope of work for a contractor went out, it was scheduled to be for about 18 months. But because of the new law, we're looking at a reduced scope of work. So right now, we're still putting together the drafts for the RFP.
Okay. But that might not be complete until after the end of this legislative session, is that correct? Or are we still working on just the changes that have been made since the past legislative session?
Right now, we're writing the scope of work based on what we have presented to us at the moment.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it sounds like it's unclear, somewhere between 12 months and 36 months?
Right, with the recent legislative action, it's unclear as to what, if any, ability municipalities have to extend their ETJs because of the change in the downzone law. And so that's still unknown. It's a big question mark. And so it's possible that this type of case is the only way we expand our jurisdiction. And we just have to wait and see what happens at the General Assembly or how the law is interpreted in courts if it get, but that takes a while. But right now, it looks like there's not going to be a lot of city-initiated zonings.
When you say this type of case, you mean just a simple rezoning annexation by a developer as opposed to a city-initiated study of an area?
Right, I mean, the city will still study because they've got a plan for services. And so that's the purpose behind it. But then once they've planned for services in the future, unless there's a change in the law, many in the bar don't think there's power to actually exercise rights to extend your ETJ.
Got it.
It would be property by property.
Right.
So it sounds like it's fair to say that at this time, there is no clarity on the specific timing or scope of that study. Yes, Vice Chair Bennett.
My microphone is not cooperating. Thank you for asking that question because that changes the direction I'm leaning in now. When I came in, I was pretty set on, I thought this should wait until the study is done because this seems like a pretty significant rezoning, given that we don't know where the study's going to happen, if the study's going to happen, if the ETJ would be extended. It seems like there are so many questions surrounding this now. I can appreciate the position of the property owner sort of being in limbo. I also hear what Commissioner Otwell is saying about this might get us a more desirable form of development than we could get under Wake County zoning. So with all those things, I flipped now, and so I support this.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I mentioned this at the last meeting, and I do appreciate the additional conditions from the developer. I love to see the undisturbed area. I wish we saw that in more developments closer to town. I don't think I can support this case just because of, I think, this style of development and annexation into the city far outside the ETJ, and something of this size kind of, for me, flies in the face of our goals as a city in terms of climate, in terms of public transit. It seems to really add to the sprawl of the city and our footprint in a huge way that I'm just not sure is best for a long-term vision of living here. So I don't think I can support it for that reason. But I do appreciate particularly the undisturbed area conditions. I think that's something that I wish we built into our comp plan more. And I hope to see some sort of visioning for that in the new comp plan that we're about to write.
Thank you very much. Other comments?
Chair Miller, just a quick comment. With the adjacent approved recent site plans, the applicants has addressed the stormwater using sort of sensitive development plan to try to keep as much open space as possible. I understand the issues with the study and the timeline, but I think there's a precedent set, and in general, I would support this application.
Thank you. Any other comments before we entertain a motion? And with that, would someone like to make a motion? Yes, Commissioner Fox.
Regarding case C-1224, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 14th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That motion passes 6-1. Thank you to the applicant and the neighbors who attended. Okay, moving on to new business. We have 4 items on the agenda today. For these items, we will hear a full staff presentation and hear comments from the public. Our first item is agenda item D1, rezoning case Z3124 at 901 Nowell Road. This case is to change approximately 0.18 acres from R4 to RX3 green frontage with conditions. We'll now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from city planning staff.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. As you mentioned, this is a request to rezone about 1/5 of an acre from R4 to RX3 with a green frontage and conditions. And your deadline for action is February 8th. So zoning in the area is a mix of residential, mixed use, as well as some industrial and even office park nearby. There are a variety of uses nearby. There are apartments kind of closer to Chapel Hill Road to the south of the site, as well as some commercial and office uses to the west. And to the north and east are predominantly lower scale residential subdivisions. Here is a zoomed in view of the site and some views of the site along Nowell Road. The applicant is proposing a single zoning condition which would limit residential density to not exceed 8 units. And so you can see that approval of the request would result in a moderate increase in entitlement for the site. The site has a below average walk, transit, and bike score. It has relatively low transportation costs, but is only served by one Go Raleigh route. And this area has very high access to jobs. The route that serves this site is Route 26, Edwards Mill, and there is a stop directly across the street. The request is within the Arena Blue Ridge area plan, and there are some specific policies that are related to developments north of Chapel Hill Road. It also falls within the boundary of the Western Boulevard small area plan, but the rezoning site itself is a little bit too far out for any relevant policies to apply. The request would add to the housing supply, does not include subsidized units, permits a variety of housing types, permits smaller units, and is within walking distance of transit. Area residents are less likely to be racial minorities than the city average. They're more likely to be low income, and the cost of rent has increased 47% between 2016 and 2022, which is higher than the citywide average. The requested residential mixed-use district is inconsistent with the low-scale residential future land use designation. But the request is consistent with the urban form map as it includes a green frontage. The site fronts on an urban thoroughfare. And the request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Consistent policies are related to compact development, infill development, zoning for housing, and 2 policies that are specific to the Arena Blue Ridge plan, the first of which discourages parking lots from fronting on streets, and the second, which discourages new single-family development north of Chapel Hill Road. And inconsistent policies are related to future land use map and zoning consistency and response time standards for fire. So if this request were approved, since it's inconsistent with the future land use map, it would result in a future land use map amendment from low-scale residential to moderate-scale residential. You can see what that would look like here. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is February 8th, and the next Planning Commission meeting is January 28th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks very much. We'll now turn to public comment. For those in support, the applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, members. My name is Mohammed Kiali, and I'm a part owner for this lot. I'm here to discuss any rezoning. There is a rezoning request for this 901 Noah Road. I think Matthew explained, so many stuff I want to talk about. I'm just here, to answer any question, any concern. I have communicated with some neighbors. They were actually have some questions about how you're gonna fit, 8 units in that. So we, last time when I met with them, said I still don't have an idea, but I'm talking with a designer, architect, so to give us a design. So so far we have not received anything yet.
Thanks very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we can move on to those in opposition. Those opposed to this project have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Bruce Mamel, 904 Cedar Downs Drive. The first thing would be, I think this lot is less than 10,000 square feet. Can you build on a lot that's less than a quarter acre? So that's my first question. It's 0.18 of 43,560. Next thing, the Milo next door has a frontage that has a bike path, sidewalk, a little bit of setback. Is that going to be continued down Null Road, or is it going to be ad hoc for each parcel as it goes down the street? The next thing is that it's next door to an R4 lot on a little neighborhood called Lincolnville, which is a dead end of R4. There's been couple of tear downs on Lincolnville, but the lot that's next door on Null is R4. So are we just going to strip out Null Road and put multifamily in there as we slowly chip away at the R4 aspects of the neighborhood? It's a mixed use, right? RX, is that what that is? So if it's mixed use and it's only going to be apartments, we had a similar case further down the street, and it was, you guys told them if you're not going to do mixed use, then take mixed use out of your designation. The applicant was talking about putting his parking underneath. So I don't know what the size of 8 units would be on a lot that's less than 10,000 square feet. If you could draw me a picture right now of what could possibly happen there, I'd really appreciate it. This seems to be backwards. We're going to approve something, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to do it, as opposed to we'd really like to know exactly what this thing is going to look like before we support it. And then, of course, the parking in the back, if there's parking in the back, will there be some sort of sufficient buffers? Will you have a lighting condition, put up whatever plantings are required so that the R4 neighborhood behind it doesn't have to put up with, excessive lighting, et cetera? So I think that's what I've got to say for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment.
I got 7 minutes. Wow. Good morning. I'm Bob Geary. I'm also a neighbor of this. I live fairly close to this site. Could we put up the zoning map? that shows where the lot is. Okay, thanks. So most of that yellow area west of Nowell Road is Lincolnville Road. And this lot is one of two lots at the top of a hill. It's the one lot that does not front on Lincolnville Road. So a question I have is access to this site, since it can't come in from Lincolnville Road, the only access is Nowell. And the access to the Milo, that big red thing at the bottom, is the Milo Apartments, and their main access is right on the edge, right on the northern edge of the site. So if traffic has to come in from Nowell to this site, it will be right next to the driveway for the Milo. So I think that's problematic. If Mohammed controlled the other lot that does front on Lincolnville Road, you could bring the cars in from Lincolnville, but that's not the case here. So this seems like it's spot zoning to me. There is a residential transition requirement, I think, at the back of this lot, 50 feet. And the frontage, green frontage should account for 30 feet or so back from the road. I'm asking, that's a question. So what's left of this site to build 8 units? It's 0.18 acres, zoned R4. Right now, you could have one house on it. I guess you could have an accessory dwelling unit or a duplex. I think you could probably put 2 duplexes on this site. 4 units would fit. I don't think 8 units really will fit. Mohammed was candid in saying he has no design for how to get 8 units on this site. The other issue I would raise is the height of an RX3 project can be 50 feet. This is, again, the top of a hill, and below it, Lincolnville Road falls down from Nowell Road. It's an historically black neighborhood. It is actually redeveloping. There's a house right behind this site, which is new, and is 2-story. So a 50-foot RX3 project at the top of the hill will just tower over that house behind it. I think RX3 is problematic. I think there are missing middle solutions that could allow him to build 4 units on this site, possibly 6, possibly 8, I don't know. But I think RX3 is too much zoning on this kind of orphan site. I would like to see him be able to build something nice on this corner. Right now, it's kind of sketchy trees. It's not adding to anybody's quality of life. But I do think RX3 is a problem. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Geary. Are there other members of the public who'd like to speak in opposition to this project? Then seeing none, we can bring it back to the table. I might kick us off with some questions for staff that were raised during the public comment. Our first question from Mr. Mammal, the question of can we build on less than a quarter of an acre? And a question about the frontage next door and how that would interact with the frontage being proposed on this site.
I'll start with the frontage question. As far as if they can build, yes, they can. But as far as the frontage requirements, so the Milo apartments that are south of this site have a parking limited frontage, which has a few different setback requirements that differ from green. Namely, they have a minimum setback that's based on the dimensional standards for the building type that they're proposing, and the Milo has several apartment building types. They have to have 50% of the building width in the primary build to, and they have a range of 0 to 100 feet for the side street build to. The green frontage is a little bit different. It requires a landscaped area between the building and the sidewalk. And it has a range of 20 feet or 50 feet for the primary build to, 15% of the building width in the primary build to, and then again, 20 or 50 feet in the side street build to. So they're slightly different, and I would say that the biggest difference is that landscaping requirement that the Milo does not have.
Thank you. And how would that compare with the current frontage entitlement?
As far as what they can build now, do you mean?
Yes.
I would have to do a little bit more digging to see what kind of frontage requirements there would be. Well, since it's a residential district, they're not required to do a frontage currently if it were developed by right.
Thank you.
That doesn't mean they wouldn't have to do some road improvements, but depending on the tier of site plan, but it does mean that they wouldn't have to include a frontage if they were to build now.
Gotcha. Thank you. The next question, I think that came up, if we could just, there's, I guess, questions about, well, I guess maybe confirming first about the height. There's a question about why we would use, or why the applicant might apply a mixed-use zoning district, even if they condition out some of the retail or commercial uses, excuse me, and the difference appears to be in the height. Can you elaborate on that and clarify any other differences?
Yeah, so R4 would permit 3 stories at 40 feet for a detached house, as well as a townhouse building type, I believe, whereas RX has a maximum height of 3 stories or 50 feet. RX also has less restrictive dimensional standards and side setbacks. So although those neighborhood transition requirements would kick in to the rear of the property, and the frontage would push it back a little bit from the street, it would developing by right in R4 would have more restrictive setback requirements than if this rezoning were approved and they developed in RX.
Thank you.
And I can go over those if you'd like.
I think I understand. Would planning commissioners like follow up on that comment, or I'll open it up to other questions and comments from the table. Commissioner Bueller?
Sorry, is it fully to us, or is there anyone else speaking from the?
The public comment has closed.
Okay. I was just looking at the overlay and noticing that it is not in the frequent transit area, although it is very close to being in the frequent transit area. I guess in my mind, the frequent transit area would also follow Chapel Hill Road, but I guess the bus service probably doesn't have enough frequency on Chapel Hill Road to do that, which is interesting because that turns into Hillsborough Street and NC State and then downtown. I don't think I'm against wanting to have 8 units on this lot as far as the density goes. I think it does kind of seem like spot zoning, what we're asking here, since it's 0.18 acres, totally surrounded by R4. I was hoping it would be in the frequent transit area, but I think it would be nice to see in a case like this, affordability conditions that are similar to the frequent transit area, being that it looks walking distance to a bus stop on Chapel Hill Road right there. Again, I know it is technically outside the FTA, but for the most part, it does follow, or almost exactly follow, those requirements. I think if it had a little bit of affordability built in, again, this being an area with a lot of students, I think that could be appropriate. It would be the kind of thing I could support. So yeah, I like it in concept. Would just like to see some added affordability if you're going from 2 possible units to 8 on what is essentially spot zoning.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to that comment or any other comments? Nope. Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners? Given the timing, if the applicant is declining to provide additional comment, I am fine letting the neighbors who are opposed to use some of their reserved time. If you'd like to come back to the podium, Mr. Geary?
I won't be long. It's hard to appreciate this site with looking at a map. This is the top of a hill, and the road, Lincolnville Road, goes downhill. And there are houses down Lincolnville Road. There's one right behind this site. This site does not front on Lincolnville Road. So you're trying to allow 8 housing units on a site that only has access to Nowell Road. All the cars associated with 8 units will have to park behind this site, in between this site and the new house behind it. I don't own the other lot. I don't own that house. I didn't go to the neighborhood meeting. I don't think anyone went to the neighborhood meeting, so we have no idea what the most adjacent neighbors think of this proposal. I don't think they think anything about it because I don't think they're aware of it. I think some care should be taken with this site because it does adjoin 2 R4 lots. And I think that approving an RX3 proposal with a 50-foot height limit, he could condition it down to 40 feet. He could condition this application in ways that address where the driveway would be for this site, because it will be problematic if the cars all enter right next to the driveway for the Milo. That'll be a traffic conflict. Mohammed said he doesn't have a plan. He just would like to be upzoned. I get that. If I owned it, I'd want to be upzoned too. But if I lived next door, or I owned the lot next door, I would care how this was developed. And so far, no care is being taken with it, to my knowledge. So that's all.
Thank you. I share some of those concerns. Other comments from the commissioners? Oh, hi, yes, we have an additional.
One last comment.
Moments?
We went to a public hearing, not a public hearing, but a meeting the other night regarding the future of the arena plan, which was going to land in your lap soon. As you look at development around us, we're about a mile from the arena, and that whole area is slated to be royally developed, let's just put it that way. Any decisions that you guys make should be in the larger context of what this entire area is going to look like. So that's why I mentioned what the frontage is going to look like along Nowell there. If you're not going to continue it, then you're just going to have ad hoc chunks whenever somebody shows up.
Thank you. So it looks like we have a number of issues before us. Any other commissioners have comments, thoughts, questions about any of this? Yes, Vice Chair Bennett.
Is the applicant willing to consider conditions about limiting the height and maybe the number of units, less than 8?
I think, I'm not going to go more than 3-story. So I think we could limit it, condition it to 40 feet. Yeah. Aye.
Thank you. Any comment on potential conditions related to the number of units?
What about the number of units?
As I mentioned, I'm still working with the designer. I really don't know what we can put right there, but yeah. So we're thinking between 6 and 8. But I don't want to add, the condition as now, because it's kind of still in the work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Raines.
Thanks, Chair Miller. One comment and a question for staff. So the Arena Blue Ridge Small Area Plan discourages lower density development north of Chapel Hill Road, including new single-family residential. That's from the plan. And there's also adjacent mixed-use 3- and 5-story zoning nearby. But with that, I guess, clarification for staff, there is no condition for frontage, but the report says the applicant is proposing green frontage. Is that?
They are, as part of the rezoning, yeah. They're asking for RX3 with a green frontage.
Green front, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. And then also to clarify the back setback up against R4, against the back neighbor, that will have to be the transition zone applies.
It would have to be a
that.
neighborhood transition, that's correct.
A, B, or C, right? Okay, thanks.
I'll also note, just for the record, that the property owner, the adjacent property owner at the intersection of Lincolnville and Nowell Road did attend the second neighborhood meeting. So she is aware of the rezoning.
Thank you. And a question about the properties to the south. I see that 2 parcels to the south is the apartment complex. What is the parcel immediately to the south?
It's a very tricky, weird parcel. So it's actually part of a flag lot of the, if you see this OP3CU here, this parcel kind of comes out like this on the other side off the map, and this is part of that lot. It looks kind of like that. Yeah, it's a hotel.
And how tall are the apartments to the south of that flag lot fronting on Lincolnville? I'm sorry, Nowell?
They're CX3, so theoretically they could go up to 50 feet, but I would have to double check if that's the site plan that they submitted.
Thank you. Thank you. So based on what I have heard from the applicant and from the neighbors, I did have concerns as well about the height, immediately approximate to R4. Channeling Commissioner O'Haver, who is not here at this time. I'm sure I want to make sure he is with us in spirit. With respect to that comment, limiting the height to 30 feet, which is equal to the existing entitlement, I think goes a long way to address those issues. And also with respect to frontage, I certainly agree with the interest in having a consistent frontage along Nowell, but under the existing entitlement, that would not occur. And it sounds like green frontage might be at least a better step in that direction. So that's what I've heard so far, but open to additional comments and concerns from commissioners. Yes.
One comment and then one question for the applicant. Just literally, it looks like directly across the street from the lot is a bus stop. And thinking about that, if you were to have eight units there, everyone with a car, and you could fit all the cars there, right? I just am thinking about how that can create a problem, pulling 8 cars out onto a street like Nowell Road, directly across from a bus stop, if the bus is there when cars are coming in and out. Anyways, I'm just envisioning how that can create jams for public transit. But my question, though, for the applicant, in addition to what you've mentioned, Chair Miller, is just would you consider any kind of affordable provision, adding that into this lot?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Would you consider adding any kind of affordable housing provision into the conditions?
Formal housing?
Affordable housing conditions.
Matt and I, we talked about that. Yeah, probably, keep 2 units to be affordable, for affordable housing, yeah.
So that's something you'd be willing to consider a condition
yes.
on?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much. So I want to clarify something I said just a moment ago. The applicant has said that he would consider reducing height from the entitlement of 50 feet under CX to 40 feet, which is the same height limitation for the current entitlement of R4. And in addition, it sounds like he's also willing to consider a condition related to affordable housing, which is great. Other comments from commissioners? Yes.
I just want to thank the applicant for addressing the neighborhoods as well as our questions and our comments, and for your willingness to consider some of the conditions that we have raised. I appreciate applicants who come and don't have attorneys and all of the experts with you, and you take it upon yourself to present this information to us. I just want to say I appreciate that, and thank you for considering the conditions. I think with those conditions, I would be prepared to support this.
Thank you. Other comments?
Second Commissioner Bennett's comments. Thank you.
And any other comments from commissioners this time? Okay. Yes, Mr. Rook? Oh, nothing? Okay. It sounds like it's probably, I would imagine it's premature to know exactly what the affordable condition is, since you're just considering it, but if you have an idea of that, we'd be willing to entertain it, or we could just say that you will review that with staff, what the options are, in order to provide an additional condition. Or do you have any additional thoughts right at this time?
I have looked at some rezoning cases, and I saw, some of these are rezoning cases that they kind of keep, a percentage of the units or the number of units for affordable housing, which is has to do like. This is a thought, like with Section 8 people maybe, a percentage of the rent, has to be like lower. That's my thought. So I really don't know more about that affordable housing.
Thank you. Commissioner Lampman?
And I appreciate the additional research you did. I think just for the sake of clarity for the case and from the comment, I think generally speaking, the city targets for people making 60% of area median income and less. Some of the other programs provide 80% of the area median income or less, and some have support for 120% of area median income and less. I don't know if you have any concepts as to what your thoughts are, because I think that will go into his future math and how he communicates with the planning department. Do you want to provide any thoughts on those parameters?
Yeah, as a city, when we do the density bonuses, they're always 60 AMI. So I think that's generally a good one to go by, just because it is built into what we already do and already have in our UDO.
If I might offer, since he's thinking about two specific units as opposed to doing a fee in lieu, 120% of area median income is still a need, but I don't know how the other commissioners feel about that.
Personally, I think given the fact that this is consistent with the goals in this area in terms of adding density north of Chapel Hill Road and otherwise, and providing the additional frontage and how small this lot is, any meaningful condition I'd be interested in entertaining.
Any meaningful?
Any meaningful
Okay.
condition related to affordable housing I'd be interested in entertaining.
Okay, I hope that this additional commentary on the income brackets, when you go back and talk to the planning department about what that mean to you, I think might be helpful in your evaluation of that, and knowing that there are like fees and lieu, but also that 2 units are greatly appreciated in this area as well. So thank you very much for that commitment.
So it sounds like the applicant is willing to provide additional conditions, one related to limiting the height requirement, and 2 related to exploring an affordable housing condition. And we need to defer this case to provide the applicant opportunity to do so. Our next meeting is January 28th, so this is a question for the applicant. If you want to provide those additional conditions for our meeting on January 28th, those conditions would need to be provided to the city by this Friday, January 17th. Do you have a sense on whether that would be enough time for you to provide those conditions, or should we push this out to a future meeting?
Yeah, next meeting will be fine.
January
Yeah,
28th would be
yeah,
fine? Okay, thank you. Well, and, yes, Vice Chair Bennett.
I'm struggling a little bit. Bear with me as I try to say this. I really appreciate you considering an affordability condition, however it looks. I think this is a 0.1 acre lot. You're looking at a maximum of 8 units, and you're saying you're willing to consider affordability. That's fantastic. But let me be clear, that is not going to sway my support of your application. We just looked at a 242 acre rezoning, and we didn't ask that applicant if they were going to consider affordability. You have a 0.1 acre lot, and we're talking about affordability. That bothers me a little bit. I think if we're going to talk about it, then we need to talk about it on all of the cases, regardless of where they are, regardless of who the developer is. So I'm more concerned that this blends in with the neighborhood. So I'm concerned about height and neighborhood transition. The affordability condition is cherry on the top if you want to do that. But if you don't, that's not going to cause me to not support your application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Other guests, Commissioner Lamon?
I definitely appreciate that commentary and feedback. What does that mean in terms of offering a condition? Is the condition being offered, or?
Not at this time.
Not
They
at this
would be,
time. Okay,
Provide
thank you.
additional comments by this Friday. So at this point, it's just providing time for the applicant to provide additional conditions. Sometimes applicants intend to do that, and then they go away and work with staff and their architects or financing and determine that they cannot make additional conditions. And so they come back at the next meeting explaining that they have not made those conditions, but why? Which is, so just because we're deferring does not mean you must make conditions between now and then. Thank you. Other comments, questions from commissioners? Okay. Well, in that case, we can defer this case until, without objection, I'm going to defer this case until January 28th at our Planning Commission regular meeting. One additional comment for the applicant: if the conditions cannot be in by this Friday and you cannot make it in time for the January 28th meeting, we could defer this case to a later Planning Commission meeting also. I believe the deadline for action, did you say, is February 8th?
It says it's February 8th, but we didn't get to it in December. And I want to say, hopefully this is accurate, that in those cases where we didn't get to it and didn't get a chance to discuss it at all, just because it appeared on the agenda, didn't necessarily trigger the 60 days.
Gotcha.
But
Well,
I would like to discuss that with Bynum. We may know by the 28th
perfect.
whether or not it's February 8th or March 11th.
Okay. Well, if it turns out that you cannot make it by the conditions in by this Friday and you want to move to a future meeting, you can just let us know before the February 28th meeting, and we can, at the January 28th meeting, we could then ask council for an extension of time to look at that. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our next item. Item D2, rezoning case Z3624 at 9000 and 9004 Litchford Road. This case is to change approximately 2.71 acres from R1 to R10 with conditions. And we will turn to Metra Sheshbaradaran for a presentation from city planning staff.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chair. My name is Mitra Sheshbaradaran, but it is spelled like how you pronounce it, so that's okay. I'm presenting on Z3624, 9000 and 9004 Litchford Road. The request is to rezone just under 3 acres of land from R1 to R10, and your deadline for action is February 10th. Zoning in the area is predominantly residential with some mixed use along the Falls of Neuse frontage within walking distance of the site. Here's a look at the surrounding area. As you can see, the site is in the middle. It's directly abutted by residential on all of its sides. To the east and west of the site is predominantly low-scale residential neighborhoods of like single-family detached homes. And north of the site is an apartment complex, and then a small apartment complex is also to the south of the site. And again, along Falls of Neuse, there's a variety of mixed-use zoning. There are 2 shopping centers, the Olive Park and Falls Point Shopping Center, the Olive Park being less than half a mile walk, essentially, from the site. And then there's also an animal hospital at the corner of Falls of Neuse and Litchford Road. Another look at the site, you can see its proximity to the Olive Park Shopping Center. And then also you can see here is some views of the site along Litchford Road. The site currently has 2 existing single-family detached units, 1 on each address. And then you can also see the current state of Litchford Road. It's a 3-lane facility currently. There are no sidewalks along Litchford, and there are some unprotected bike lanes along the street. The applicant has proposed 2 conditions. The first is to prohibit the cemetery use, and the second is capping principal dwelling units at 40. We can take a look at the change in entitlement from going from R1 to R10. It's pretty significant. Under the R1, the maximum number of units is 2 units, and that would be single-family detached, and then the 40 unit cap from the second condition would be the entitlement for under R10. Taking a look at transportation energy analysis, the area or the site does have a higher walk score and bike score than average and lower transportation costs than average. There's no transit score for the site. It's not immediately served by any transit routes, and it has an average proximity to job score when compared to the rest of the city. The nearest bus service is Route 25L, the Triangle Town Link. It's to the north of the picture by the Wake Med North Hospital, and that's over half a mile from the site. But the site itself is not directly served by any transit. I will note it's near a transit emphasis corridor, so Falls of Neuse, which is slated for higher transit in the future. Looking at affordability for the site, the request does add to existing housing supply, expands housing types that are able to be built on the site, and does allow for smaller units or units and lot sizes to be built on the site than currently under R1. The request does not include any affordability or subsidized units at the moment, and it is not within walking distance of existing transit. And then looking at demographics for the area, the site is in an area that has a lower percentage of people of color and a lower percentage of low-income residents living in the area, and median gross rent has risen slower than the rest of the city at 13.26% compared to 25.5% since between 2016 and 2022. The request is consistent with the future land use map designation of moderate scale residential for the area. There is no urban form guidance for the site, and frontages are not required for residential zoning districts. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. A number of policies were cited for making it consistent, most having to do with compact development, as well as expanding housing opportunity and choice and zoning for housing. There's also a policy related to corridor development, and that's touching on its proximity to Falls of Neuse Road north of the site. There were no inconsistent policies found. There are no outstanding issues for the request. Your deadline for action is February 10th, and here are your upcoming meetings.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment for those in support. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Jennifer Ashton from Longleaf Law Partners. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant, the Taylor family. They own 2 companies, GLT Properties, which is their development group, and then also TMC Construction, which is their construction group. They have owned 9,000 Litchford Road since 1967. Greg Taylor, his mother lived there for many, many years. So they are looking to do 40 townhome units, a for-sale product on this site, and 9,000 for Litchford Road. And this is a true family project for them. And it's near and dear to their hearts, just given their family history with this site, or specifically with 9,000 for Litchford. The property is 2.715 acres. Currently, it does have those 2 single-family homes on it. It has frontage along Litchford Road. The current zoning is R1, and the future land use designation is that moderate-scale residential. And the proposed zoning, we are looking to go to R10 with conditions, one of those main conditions being that we are capping our total number of units to 40 at the specific request of residents having concerns about total density on site. Staff had indicated in their on-vision results that we could have up to 48 units on site, so we are reducing that voluntarily by about 16%. Existing conditions. This is a really unique site within North Raleigh. It is rare to have a site in North Raleigh that is this close to this many things. North Raleigh tends to be a very automobile-dependent area. So this site is wonderfully located. It's very close to Falls of Neuse Road, quick access to 540 to the south. We also have the Wake Med North Campus immediately to our north on Durant Road. And then also you'll see the Durant Middle School there a little bit to the northeast. So again, just a really well centrally placed site. Also, as Mitra had mentioned, we have a ton of existing retail and office amenities around us. This site, again, in North Raleigh, finding something that is within walking distance to existing retail is rare. We do have 2 shopping centers, both within about a 10 to 12-minute walk from the site. One shopping center has a Sprouts grocery store, and the other one has a Harris Teeter. So again, 2 grocery stores within walking distance is a really, really great feature to this. And there also is an animal hospital, a bank, a Starbucks, and then there's Kohl's, and there's quite a few also restaurant amenities in both of those shopping centers. I do want to point out as well that our site, we do have the Muirfield Village Apartments to our north. That is an R10. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then we also have a smaller apartment site to our south. That is R6. So we are wedged in between 2 apartment sites. So we think townhomes there makes a lot of sense, not only from what's surrounding us on our side of Litchford, but also the close proximity to the existing retail. We are outside the corporate limits, but we are within the ETJ. We're in this little donut hole, as you can see on the map. So this is a prime location to come in and go ahead and be annexed. City services are ready and available for connection once that annexation happens. The current zoning for our site is R1. We're kind of one of these remnant parcels left over on this side of Litchford Road. A good amount of our side of Litchford has already been rezoned to higher density. As I mentioned, that apartment site to our north is R10. The one immediately to our south is R6. And then there are a bunch of R6 single-family communities to our east, and then there's that R4, the Woodstone community, to our west. Also, you'll see the Sprout Shopping Center there is that NX3. There's some office mixed use in there as well. And then that Kohl's Shopping Center to the north is that CX3. Our future land use designation is moderate scale residential. That's a type of designation that is really looking for you to place that missing middle housing type in this spot. So we are proposing that with the townhome units. And then also, according to the future land use map, the corresponding zoning districts are that R6 and R10. So we're being consistent by proposing R10 here. I did want to show you the urban form map just to kind of give you a flavor for the area. Litchford Road does not have an urban form designation, and as Mitra mentioned, frontages aren't applied to residential districts, but I did want to talk a little bit about Falls of Neuse right now. We heard a lot of comments during the neighborhood meetings about traffic on Falls and how horrible it is. Falls is undergoing a massive expansion project right now. It is going to a 6-lane divided highway. That project is slated to be finished in September of 2025 this year. Obviously, there probably will be some delays. I've never seen a roadway project like that not have delays, but just to give this commission some comfort on when we're actually adding our traffic, we're not even looking to have building permits for this project until probably February of 2026. So that Falls project should be completed by the time we are ready for occupancy. Once that new Falls expansion is complete, Falls will have a ton more capacity than it does today. So I'm thinking the concerns about traffic, they may not ever go away, but it should be a lot better out there. The street plan, I did want to talk to you all about this for a minute, specifically about Litchford Road. Right now, as Mitra mentioned, Litchford is a 2-lane road with a turn lane in it. According to the street plan, Litchford eventually will be an avenue 4-lane divided. Litchford right now, I think, is programmed up to 20,000 vehicles per day, and it's nowhere close to that. I think staff in the staff report mentioned that it's about 13,000 vehicles per day, and based on current growth trends, it's not supposed to reach capacity until like 2050. So we, according to our traffic analysis, are only going to be adding 21 a.m. peak hour trips and 25 p.m. peak hour trips. So we're not going to be greatly impacting Litchford Road. And when we do actually get our occupancy, Litchford will still be well under capacity. I do want to spend a moment on what Litchford will look like someday in the future when it is expanded. And we, as the developer, will be responsible for our portion, our side of our Litchford Road improvements. Some things to note: right now, there are no sidewalks along our frontage. There are sidewalks that start a little bit north to us, but not along our frontage. So we will be required to add sidewalks. And then also right now, there are unprotected bike lanes in Litchford Road. So bikes are having to share the road with cars, which is a pretty unsafe situation, given how curvy Litchford Road is. So with this development, the developer will be responsible for providing a protected bike lane that is set 3.5 feet back from curb. So it will be a definite improvement to what is out there. Topography for this site, I just wanted to spend a minute on this. There were some questions from neighbors at the Woodstone community. I guess a few years ago, the city of Raleigh did a sewer project. It didn't go very well, and it caused some erosion in their yards, and they just wanted to make sure that our stormwater wasn't going to be impacting them. The topography map here shows that from Litchford Road to the back of our site, there's about a 16-foot grade change downhill. So our stormwater is going to be running away from Woodstone, and it most likely will have a stormwater pond in that very north corner of the site. So our stormwater will not be running towards the Woodstone neighborhood. It will not be impacting them. As I was mentioned earlier, we do have 2 conditions. One was just a prohibition on a use, and then also that reduction in density to the 40 dwelling units, again, to try to address neighbor concerns about density. And as Mitra mentioned, we are consistent with the future land use map, and we're consistent with the comp plan overall. And again, hopefully we can bring this project to an area that is walkable and has a lot of existing retail amenities. I think it will be a great missing middle project for North Raleigh. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We will now turn to public comment for those, we'll now turn to public comment for the opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Please come to the podium. And seeing none, we will bring it back to table discussion for questions and comments from commissioners. Commissioner Raines. Yes.
Question for staff regarding forestry. There was a comment that I'd just like to get clarity on. It says that in R1, there's a 15% conservation requirement, and in R10, it's 10%?
Yeah, that's correct. R1 in the UDO is slated for a tree conservation area of 15%, and then R10 and most other districts only require 10%. So their request is within what the UDO requires.
Okay, but that makes sense, and I don't have any objection to that, but it seems like the forestry comment was saying that it wanted to keep the 15%. Or recommends that for...
Urban Forestry was just highlighting that there is a difference going from one to the other, and just was, I think, trying to note that for commissioners. Yeah.
All right, thanks for clarifying.
Other questions from commissioners?
I mean, to that, would the applicant be willing to preserve the R1 tree conservation level?
We do not have enough room on site to do that. There are some really challenging grading features with this site. Also, too, we're not quite sure yet what actually qualifies for tree conservation. There's a bunch of trees, especially at the rear of the site. There's all these requirements about 50 foot of critical root zone have to be preserved. A lot of those trees seem to be right on the boundary. So we just aren't able to commit to anything like that at this point in time without knowing all of this information and being able to accommodate all those grade changes. I do want to point out too that when you go up in zoning categories, you go from R1 to something else, the UDO does take into account the fact that you're probably providing higher density projects, and therefore you're going to have other offsets. You're going to have outdoor amenity area, you're going to have these other common spaces that need to be provided, and that's the UDO's offset for conservation areas. So with taking all that into account and the fact we only have 2.7 acres to deal with here, we just can't commit to that.
So are there plans for there to be a public amenity area like what you're talking about with green space?
It's going to be outdoor amenity area for the residents' use, which is consistent with UDO requirements.
Mr. Fox.
I'm not finding any inconsistencies with adopted policy on this case, so I'm ready to support it at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Any other thoughts before we move to a motion? I'd like to entertain a motion.
For case Z3624, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 14th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to our final new business item, D4, rezoning case Z3724 at 326 Chapin Oak Road. This case.
There's one more. Sumner.
Oh, excuse me. I jumped ahead in my agenda. Excuse me. Sorry about that. In my script, our second to last rezoning case, D3Z3224 at 4020 Sumner Boulevard. This case is to change approximately 1.96 acres from CX4 conditional use to CX5 conditional use. And we will now turn to Matthew Clem for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Thank you. Hello again. So your deadline for action is in April. You can see the site here outlined in gray. The surrounding area is also similarly zoned with commercial mixed use with varying zoning conditions, frontages, and building height limits. This is the site as it currently exists today. There's a stormwater pond here serving the area, but the site is undeveloped and has, it appears just to be undeveloped and graded. It's at the intersection of Wake Hills and Triangle Town Boulevard and Sumner Boulevard here. This is the Triangle Town Center Shopping Center northwest of the site, and there's some adjacent new build apartments as well. But generally just in the Triangle Town Center shopping area. This is a view from the street. This is Sumner Boulevard looking west. This is the site here. You can see there's some fill dirt at the corner of the intersection as well, but the site is undeveloped in the area. So there are a number of zoning conditions prohibiting uses. The conditions 2 through 4 mimic what might otherwise be required by an urban frontage in terms of build to, parking restriction, and building entrances. So the request will increase the permitted building height by a story and increase units, office, and retail yield as well. The site does have a higher walking, transit, bike score, a higher transportation cost index, and job proximity index compared to the city. There are several local crosstown and regional transit routes that serve the area. You can see them listed there, and the routes in the colored lines on the map. Now this is the site here. The request does add to the housing supply. There is not a condition dedicating subsidized units, but it does check the other boxes here for the affordability analysis in the staff report. The area is more racially diverse than the citywide average. Half of the residents in the area are lower income earners compared to the citywide, and housing costs have increased faster here as well. The request is consistent with the future land use map of community mixed use. It is inconsistent with the urban form map, which has several converging pieces of guidance here. So there's the urban thoroughfare on Sumner Boulevard. It is in a city growth center and in the frequent transit area, as you see there. And then the western property line is along Main Street designation. So this policy package would recommend an urban style of development. The applicants have gotten closer to that with the conditions pertaining to Sumner Boulevard, but the Main Street designation on the western property line has not been addressed by the conditions. Also, nor would it be requested by the application of an urban frontage, because Wake Hills Lane is not a public street. When this map was made, the city's street plan had Triangle Town Boulevard extending to the south. That street was removed from the street plan a number of years ago. This map was not amended to remove the urban form guidance off of what would otherwise have been a future public street. Regardless, the policy is saying what it is today, that the area should be designed with an urban form in mind and to increase walkability of the area. So if the Planning Commission wanted better consistency with this set of policies, some condition language to improve the urban form of that property frontage could be considered, similarly to what has been provided on Sumner Boulevard. Otherwise, consistent with the plan overall, future land use map, again, inconsistent with urban form. This is your consistent policies in the comprehensive plan and inconsistent policies, including area plan guidance as well. And there are no outstanding issues. The applicant's here for their presentation, and we'll take questions after that.
Thank you very much. Now turning to public comment. For those in support, the applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Worth Mills here on behalf of the property owner and the rezoning applicant. It's proposed rezoning of 4020 Sumner Boulevard. Parcels just under 2 acres on the south side of Sumner, southeast of the Triangle Town Center. We're looking to add an additional story to our existing CX4CU district in order to facilitate a 5-story hotel. It is consistent with the future land use map and with the 2030 comprehensive plan. So as Matt mentioned, the site has been cleared. It does contain a stormwater pond with drainage easements that I'll highlight in just a second. And again, I did want to note that Wake Hills Lane is a private street that intersects with Sumner, runs south of this site and towards the Exchange apartments that were built in 2023 and is planned to be another access point for the site, but again is not a public right-of-way. So this is a 2023 plat showing the last bit of right-of-way abandonment that the city giving up its rights in Wake Hills Lane in 2023. I also want to show the easements that were dedicated simultaneously with the street abandonment. So here we have a 10-foot gas easement. Here we have a 20-foot water line easement. And then in this area is, again, the edge of that public drainage easement. So that blue star there really denotes the closest that any building could be located to the Sumner Wake Hills Lane intersection, given the easements that are on the property today. Again, a photo of the site from the Sumner Wake Hills intersection. I will note too, on the right-hand side of Wake Hills Lane, the property developed across Wake Hills Lane has essentially turned its back on that private street. It faces Triangle Ridge, which is west of this private street. And so again, I think it makes sense not to add any sort of conditions to kind of create a public realm on Wake Hills Lane when, again, the city has no interest in it and our adjacent property owners are treating it, they're treating it essentially as a back of house street. Again, the current zoning is CX4 CU. Most of the properties surrounding us are a mix of either CX3, CX4, or CX5. And the future land use map designates this for community mixed use, as much of the surrounding property is as well. Triangle Town Center designated as regional mixed use. And it is within a very large city growth center. So heights up to 12 stories would be permitted. So we're well within the height guidance of table LU2. But again, I did want to go back to this urban format street plan. Left-hand side, urban format, right-hand side is an excerpt from the amendment to the City of Raleigh street plan. So in 2019, the city removed this portion of Wake Hills Lane from its street plan. A lot of that deals with a power line easement outlined in yellow by Duke Energy that leads to a substation to the south. There is a lot of rock within that area, and to my understanding, Duke said absolutely no way are you going to be blasting within our easement area. And so what the city did was when they removed Wake Hills Lane, they essentially shifted that street to what is now Triangle Ridge just to the west. But the urban form map remained as is, so you've got this inconsistency between what the city's plans are just from a public street perspective versus what the urban form map would say for frontage. And then going through the conditions again, one is your pretty typical use prohibitions. Condition 2 establishes a build-to range of 5 feet to 30 feet, which is pretty similar to the build-to range in an urban limited frontage of 0 feet to 20 feet. And we're requiring at least 40% of the property's lot width be occupied by front building facade in that build-to range. 50% would be the minimum in the urban limited district. So trying to keep as close to that as we can. And one of the reasons we didn't add a frontage on the urban, or add the urban limited, is because of that existing drainage easement area for that pond, which does eat up a good portion of that frontage on the eastern side of this site. And then conditions 3 and 4 are regulations that you would find in an urban limited frontage. No on-site parking or vehicular surface area between the building and Sumner Boulevard. And each principal building will have at least one building entrance that faces Sumner Boulevard. So this slide here shows the latest sort of concept for a building footprint. You can see that building is shifted towards the west and towards that Sumner Boulevard, Wake Hills Lane intersection, like a frontage with 2 public streets would call for. But again, given the easements that are on site, that's practically as close as anyone could build to that intersection. The existing stormwater pond is planned to be removed, and all of those stormwater retention facilities would go underground. That will likely cause the private drainage easement area to shrink to some extent, but we don't know the extent of kind of how that may be modified when you put stormwater facilities underground. But this is the latest, most detailed plan that I have, and I think it highlights where we're putting the building and the sort of urban environment that the applicant plans to create here at, towards this public street and private street intersection. So again, request to rezone 4020 Sumner Boulevard from CX4 CU to CX5 CU. It's consistent with the future land use map, with the comprehensive plan overall. We think our conditions regarding the building placement of Sumner Boulevard are consistent with the urban form map and what that would require. I think the important thing to note here is if we did include an urban limited frontage on this site, there would be no building placement requirements along Wake Hills Lane. We think it's reasonable and in the public interest, and we would respectfully request a recommendation of approval, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we can move it on to public comment for those in opposition. Those opposed to this case have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Please come to the podium. And then seeing none, we can bring it back to the table. Thank you. Questions from our commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I have a question for staff. Is it normal to update the urban frontage map at the same time a street plan is revised? Was that missed, or is that just something that needs to be handled separately?
I think it would probably depend on a case-by-case basis. It didn't happen in this case.
Thank you.
I'm satisfied with these urban form conditions that have been offered, and otherwise I don't see any inconsistencies. And I'd be ready to move forward on this when everybody's ready.
Thank you. Commissioner Fox?
I have a question for the applicant, just a little clarification. If you don't mind pulling up that concept plan again.
Let's see.
Pointing out where
it's okay.
that
Okay.
current stormwater device is located, the above-ground one.
So the current stormwater pond, I think you would probably say right in here. And then all stormwater detention facilities are planned to be located underground and have that detention and treatment done below grade.
And I think it's an unfortunate choice. I think it could have been amenitized. I like to see above-ground facilities more often than not, but from a policy perspective, it's not inconsistent with policy right now.
And to provide a little context, I know that this applicant and you know, the ultimate hotel user was looking for a lot of parking for this site, and I think that had a lot of impact on what to do with that stormwater pond.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Ready to entertain a motion? Yes.
With regard to Z 3224, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 14th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. And now, moving on to our final new business case, item D4, rezoning case Z3724 at 326 Chapin Oak Road. This case is to change approximately 6.1 acres from IX3 Parking Limited with TOD to CX5 Conditional Use with TOD. And we will now turn to Robert Tate for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, Commission. Robert Tate, Planning and Development. This is rezoning request Z3724 at 326 Chapin Oak Road. So this request is to rezone a little bit more than 6 acres from IX3 PL with the Transit Overlay District to CX5 with some zoning conditions and keeping that Transit Overlay District. I'd like to note really briefly before I get into the presentation that this property is owned by Wake County, but the applicant is representing the developer who would eventually develop this site. So just to want to clarify that. Your deadline for action is March 15th. So zoning in the area is predominantly industrial mixed use and commercial mixed use, with South Wilmington Street largely dividing the two zoning districts. This site falls within the eastern side of that. Here's a closer look at the surrounding land uses to the site. So looking west, you'll have the International Food Shopping Center and some other commercial uses. A bit further west than that is the Renaissance Park planned development, which is largely moderate scale residential. North of the site is the Mont Lawn Funeral Home and Cemetery. And then to the south and east are a couple of institutional uses, even though they are zoned for industrial mixed use. Some warehouse and light industrial uses are also found a bit further east and southeast. So looking at the street view of the site, this first image at the top left is looking from South Wilmington Street into the site. The second is along Chapanoke Road, looking to the west. And then the third at the bottom right is looking northwest into the site from Chapanoke Road, and kind of highlights where that Duke Energy overhead easement is located through the site. So the applicant has proposed a couple of conditions. The first would limit the residential entitlement to no more than 200 units, and then also limit commercial uses to no more than 12,000 square feet. And that second condition is just a prohibition on various uses that would otherwise be allowed in the CX district. So looking at the change in entitlement from the IX to CX, so 206 units will be allowed by right today, but the applicant has proposed to effectively marginally change that to 200 units, so a slight decrease in units allowed with the proposal, and then also with the second condition, or the first condition, would limit commercial uses a bit more, so going from over 280,000 square feet of office and almost 200,000 square feet of retail being reduced down to 12,000 in this request. So this site has a higher transit and walk score than average, but has a lower bike score. The transportation cost index and job proximity is above average here at the site. And speaking on transit, here is a map of the service available to the site today, with the route number 7 having 2 stops near the site. And then I'd also like to note that this site falls within the southern corridor of the bus rapid transit that's programmed to run down South Wilmington Street. There's a future station located less than 500 feet of the site. So like I mentioned, this request would technically subtract some units from the site, but it's relatively marginal. And it does not include subsidized units in the proposal itself, but would unlock some more housing types that are currently not available in IX. And it would allow smaller units and smaller lots than the citywide average, and like mentioned, also within walking distance of transit. Area residents are more likely to be racial minority and also low income than the citywide average. And rent is increasing in this area, but at a slightly slower pace than the citywide average since 2020. So this request is inconsistent with the future land use map designation of business and commercial services, and that's largely because the CX zoning district would allow ground floor retail, where industrial mixed use would not allow that at the bottom floor of a mixed use building. This is consistent with the urban form map. Although a zoning frontage is not evident and clear in the proposal, the TOD overlay would require development to have a urban limited frontage. So inconsistent with future land use map, but consistent with urban form, overall consistent with the comp plan. And there are a comprehensive list of consistent policies, but largely speak to access to transit, housing, and rezoning industrial sites to a more commercial zoning when close to transit. Again, inconsistent with the future land use map, so triggering that one policy. And there are no outstanding issues. Your deadline for action is March 15th. And right before I pass this back to you all, this, like I mentioned, was inconsistent with the future land use map. So this would effectively automatically require approval of an amendment to the future land use map if you do approve this case today. So that would be going from business and commercial services to community mixed use, and shown here on this map. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thanks very much. Before we move to public comment, I believe there are 2 members of the commission who would like to recuse themselves. Commissioners Peeler and Lampman, would you provide us a comment about your recusal request?
Yes, it's not necessarily the applicant themselves, but in the development agreement that was provided, my company works alongside the parties listed in the development agreement. So,
Thank you very much.
I'm in the same situation.
Thank you. Without objection, I'd like to recuse Commissioners Lampman and Peeler from this rezoning case. Thanks very much. And with that, moving on to public comment for those in support. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
We just lose quorum has been asked.
We have not. I'll defer to our legal counsel, but I believe as long as they are present, even if they're recused, we can still continue with the quorum. Would our counsel like to confirm that? We haven't, whether we have not lost a quorum?
We have not lost the quorum. That's what I was just. That's what I was just discussing with Commissioners Lampman and Peeler to make sure at least one of them stayed in the room, so we had a quorum. If they both exited, we would have been in trouble. But they both indicated they were interested in seeing what happened. So we have not lost a quorum, and a majority is based on the 5 we have at the table.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks for that clarification and for checking on that. We appreciate it. Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the Commission. I'm Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe, here on behalf of the applicant, Raleigh Community Partners. I'm joined by my colleague, Walker Abbott, who will cover the merits of this case, and the members of Raleigh Community Partners will be introduced by Hunter Sellings. But I'd just like to note that this request is a meaningful one to provide housing and appropriately scaled retail along a transit corridor for the community, but also for affordable housing options and related amenities for Wake Tech students. And the reason for that is that this land is owned by Wake County. It's subject to a deed restriction to provide affordable housing, as well as some ancillary related commercial uses. And then it's also subject to an agreement to provide that affordable housing at a complex rate that ranges from 30% AMI to 80% AMI. And I wanted to mention that now because while you won't see a zoning condition that's typical that you just discussed earlier today, where you're used to seeing that form language from the city that's become customary. The reason for that is because there are protections in place, both in the deed and the memorandum of understanding, that the parties need to work through and ultimately are controlled by another municipality, Wake County. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Hunter Snellings to introduce Raleigh Community Partners.
Good morning. Hunter Snellings, VP of Development with Harmony Housing Affordable Development. I'm joined today by Monty, James Montague with F7 Development. He's a development partner with us on this project, as well as Bob Valatingen with Gilbane Development Company. Together, we are Raleigh Community Partners. Little context for the project. We were awarded by competitive RFP the opportunity to develop this site by way of Wake County in August of 2022. We're excited that we're at this important threshold on the project. It's been an in-depth planning effort with Wake County, involving some of Wake County staff as well as City of Raleigh staff. As Jamie mentioned, the RFP requires some complicated affordability structure, and the land is deeded to affordability. We're exclusively affordable housing developer, and we are proud to collaborate with Wake County on this project. It just asks for your recommendation for approval to head to City Council. We are in line to apply for low-income housing tax credits on this, as well as bond capacity in the May window, but as a condition of that, the site needs to be rezoned appropriately for that effort, and so we ask for your recommendation today. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Miller and Commissioners. My name is Walker Abbott, and as Jamie mentioned, I will be going through the details of this case. I'll start with a brief site overview. This is a just over 6-acre site located at the corner of South Wilmington Street and Chapin Oak Road. It is just north of the Wake Tech Public Safety Campus and just south of Montlawn Cemetery. It's just over 1 mile south of Interstate 40 and downtown, and it's currently a vacant site, but it's nestled among commercial and institutional uses along South Wilmington Street, a main gateway into the city. It's currently zoned industrial mixed use, 3 stories, with a parking limited frontage in the Transit Overlay District. The IX3 was placed on the site in the 2016 remapping when much of the surrounding area was industrial. The Transit Overlay District has been applied more recently as this area is near the South Wilmington Street planned BRT route. The comprehensive plan supports density and a mixed-use development on this site because of the transit investments that staff did a great job going through. I'll quickly highlight some of the urban form designations as a transit station area, a frequent transit area, a BRT area, and a mixed-use center. The future land use map is designated business and commercial services, and this designation does include higher impact commercial activities and housing and mixed use developments. And this designation was placed on the site with the IX zoning, and as shown, much of the surrounding area has changed to community mixed use, as shown in red. The site is also part of the Southern Gateway Small Area Plan, which envisions coordinating development with transit investment, along with policies supporting public-private partnerships, as shown here on the slide. And that's exactly what we're doing here to deliver housing and community-scaled retail and commercial on this site. With that comprehensive plan guidance in mind, we are requesting to rezone this site to community mixed use, 5 stories with conditions and the TOD. The CX allows for more flexibility with residential configuration than industrial mixed use, which does not permit ground floor residential. The CX designation is also consistent with parcels down South Wilmington Street, as you can see in red. And this demonstrates the trend away from industrial uses and towards commercial and residential uses that align with the city's transit investments. The CX would update the flume to commercial mixed use, but the urban form, small area plan, and comp plan policies overall make this request consistent with the comp plan as stated on page 6 of the staff report. 5 stories is also consistent with the comprehensive plan as explained on more detail on page 7 of the staff report, as the comprehensive plan recommends between 2 and 12 stories for this area because of its proximity to the Chapanoke Road BRT station. The TOD will prohibit certain uses as shown on your screen and will automatically apply in urban frontage. Our conditions include prohibiting certain uses otherwise permitted in CX but not previously prohibited by the TOD, a residential unit cap of 200 units, and a 12,000 square foot commercial cap, which will include some flex space for both residents and Wake Tech students, in addition to other commercial uses. We are removing the parking limited frontage for 2 reasons, the first of which is that the TOD automatically applies in urban limited frontage, and there is a 70-foot transmission line easement that slices the site, as you can see highlighted in blue, across the South Wilmington Street and the Chapanoke frontages. Here's a closer look at our zoning conditions. Again, capping the development at 200 units and 12,000 square feet of commercial uses, and prohibiting uses, a jail, prison, adult entertainment, check cashing, payday loan facility, tattoo and piercing parlors, a taxidermist, and a wedding chapel. This request is consistent with several policies noted in the staff report on page 9. I've highlighted a few here on the slide. The first few focus on the city's transit investments, but the main policy I want to highlight is LU 11.4, rezoning and development of industrial areas, specifically sites in the immediate vicinity of planned transit stations. And this really gets at the heart of the request here, because we're requesting to rezone this site from IX to CX to activate a prominent corner of the Southern Gateway to the city with residential and commercial in close proximity to transit infrastructure. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we can move it on to public comment for those in opposition. Any person opposed to this project will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Please come to the podium. And seeing none, we can bring this back to the table. of 5. For any questions, comments from our commissioners? Yes.
My grandparents are located right to the north of this property. I think they'd be fine with it.
Not recused, though. Fine, yeah. Likewise, I used to live across the street in Renaissance Park and would not have been opposed to this. Although that light, traffic light is a little obnoxious, this would not impact that issue from that angle. But that issue does need to be addressed. Unrelated. Other comments from commissioners? Yes, Vice Chair Bennett.
Sorry, wow, that was really dramatic. Okay. It's a question for staff, I guess. The alignment of the BRT route in this proximity, is there a streetscape plan that's going to be associated with the BRT improvements? Or is that just part of the capital project? I just wanted to get a little bit more information.
Sure. So that could be something that comes out of the station area planning project that we're currently underway doing as a recommendation. But at this time, I'm not sure if that's something we're aware of.
But if not, it would be part of the capital project, I believe, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So given the easement and the capital project and that huge capital investment, I don't have any issues with this project. I'm ready to support it at the appropriate time.
Yes.
I was going to make a similar comment. I don't have any issues with this. I'm always excited to see an affordable housing project. I love the innovation, the proximity to Wake Tech, given some of the other development that's occurring in this area. You know, I don't have the concern of an over-concentration of affordable housing. I think it's necessary. It's along a prominent BRT route, so I'm prepared to support it at the appropriate time as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Raines, any thoughts?
I'd just like to echo the other comments from the commissioners.
Thank you. No other comments? I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Fox.
In regards to case Z3724, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 14th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Thanks very much. Great. And moving on to approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes on our agenda from December 10th. Are there any comments to the minutes? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thanks very much. Moving on to report of the chair. Happy New Year. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a good break and stayed healthy, and look forward to another year with you guys. Moving down the line.
Yes, Happy New Year. Good to see commissioners' faces in person. Let's see, Infrastructure and Mobility Committee, there are no discussions pending, so we will not have a meeting on January 23rd.
Text Change Committee, next scheduled meeting is February 19th. And there's no current items on the agenda, but we'll keep that open. It could be something that pops up, so we'll stay in touch about that. And we should look forward to getting some interesting text changes coming through in springtime.
Thank you.
Committee of the Whole, Happy New Year, everyone. Committee of the Whole will meet January 23rd at 4 in room 305. We'll be I thought you were going to.
I have an.
Is there an update to that?
There is an update to the location. I was going to write to the
okay.
report, but since you mentioned it, we're going to be relocating to council chambers.
Okay,
There's some-
excellent. So January 23rd, 4 p.m. in the council chambers we'll be discussing the Lenovo Center rezoning.
Thank you. Could we please get by show of hands those who intend to attend that meeting on January 23rd at 4 p.m.? We have 5, and I will be recused from that case. If I'm needed for attendance, then I will attend as the 6th, but otherwise, I'll send out a note to everyone else to check for attendance as well. Thank you.
The next Strategic Planning Committee meeting is scheduled for February 12th. There is only one item on the agenda. However, we are working with staff right now to understand the implications of Senate Bill 382, which bans downzoning, which is directly related to the NCOD topic. So more information forthcoming.
No report.
No report, but Happy New Year.
Thank you. Moving to report of our Assistant Director.
Nothing to add outside of that location change for Committee of the Whole.
Yes. Anything else from Mr. York?
Yes, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Carolyn Bockel, sitting behind me. She is going to be sitting in this chair in the interim until my position is filled. And so just wanted to introduce you all to her. She will be at the meeting on the 28th, and she will also be attending our Committee of the Whole meeting on the 4th? 23rd.
Nice to meet you.
Pardon? No, I'll be at those meetings as well, but, so,
Dagger
give you
through
more
my heart.
opportunities to speak with her. Yeah, I'm with you guys to the bitter end. So I'll
Can't
be here
shake
all the
it.
way through the 31st.
Thanks very much. Anything else for the good of the order? Then with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.